Well, I have some good news and some bad news. The bad news is we're reading another Phantom of the Opera fanfic. The good news is the fanfic is actually good. That's a plus. I mean, I do like Phantom of the Opera, but, well, it could be worse. What would I rather do? Read another Phantom of the Opera fanfic, or read another fanfic about me and Meg that's just bizarre? I think I'll stick with Phantom of the Opera. So, this story is called Glass Heart by Multicolored Rose Petals. It's a very long story, so 46 chapters, almost 60,000 words, so it's not the longest story in the world, but it is pretty long for fanfiction standards, and it has over 200 reviews, which is quite a lot, if I might add. So this story starts off in a mill, a textile mill to be exact, and Christine is working at it. The thing is, 3 years prior to the events of this story, Christine lost her mother and her 2 brothers to an illness, thus leaving her and her father on their own. Now, they used to be in high society, and you would think that, her father, Gustav, would have been able to provide for her. But no, instead he sank into a depression and pretty much destroyed himself by drinking alcohol non-stop, thus forcing his daughter to provide for them. Obviously, they're no longer part of high society. Christine keeps on trying to get jobs as governesses and whatnot to get a better pay to provide for her and her father, but she keeps on getting turned down because of how her father has turned out. Because of how he's been acting, it's been affecting her reputation as well. The story opens up with her wrapping up her shift at the mill, and she works 6-hour days from sunrise to sunset. Now, this takes place in the late 1800s, and mills back then were not ideal places to be working at, especially if you're a girl. So, Christine makes her way to a house a few blocks away, and she has a letter that she wants to give to her father's friend. She's giving this letter to an acquaintance of her father's friend named Daniel, who's going to pass the letter off to the father's friend. The father's friend, we will later learn, is the Phantom of the Opera, aka Erik. He was providing for her father, but he got to a point that he was getting fed up and refused to do so. The only reason why he's been giving money now is because it's Christine asking instead, although Daniel warns Christine that he might not say yes this time. Christine accepts this and she goes back home. The thing is, she had given her father some of her earnings because he promised, and I mean promised, that he was going to go out shopping and get them groceries for the week. Does he keep this promise? It becomes apparent that he doesn't, because when she gets home, there's no one to be seen. And there's no groceries, just a stale piece of bread that was left from the morning. Just one piece of bread that she has to have for her dinner. So she's obviously upset. And a bit later on in the evening, she wakes up to hear her father coming home, and it's obvious that he's drunk. And it's obvious that he did not buy the groceries like he promised. He asks for forgiveness, and she just turns her back to him and goes back to bed because, what can she say? She's not surprised, but she's still clearly upset. So a couple more hours pass, and she awakes to someone knocking on the door. She goes and answers the door, and what greets her is this tall, lanky creature who turns out to be the Phantom of the Opera himself, Erik. He wakes up Gustav and has a few choice words for him, and Christine's just sitting there, observing everything that's going on, seeing her father flinch at being called out for his nonsense, and realizing that her father had not actually met his friend in person before. They had just corresponded through letters, and this was his first time meeting this person in person. Now, obviously, Erik is wearing a mask to conceal his deformities. He's described as being very lanky, very long and lanky, kind of skeletal looking and whatnot. So, Erik pulls out an envelope that has 5,000 francs in it. He offers it to Gustav in exchange for Christine's hand in marriage. Now, Christine herself is considering saying yes, but she doesn't get the chance to because her father, without hesitation, says yes, and this deeply upsets her, because to her, her father is just selling her for money. So she yells at both Erik and her father, says that she hates them both, but says that she hates her father more and does go off with Erik. Now she stresses to Erik immediately on the coach ride back to his place that she will never ever love him. And they're both kind of off with each other at first. I mean, for her, it's obviously why. She's very upset about how things happened. And, for Erik, to her, he's coming off as cold and stuff, but, it's obvious that he's not really used to being around people, and he's just odd at expressing his feelings. So they go underground, go across the lake to his mansion. It's described as being very gothic, and, she at first does not like the idea of living at this place, but, she sees that he has a cat and that he actually doesn't seem all that bad. And a bit later on in the evening, she can hear that he's playing the piano and such beautiful music. But she lets her pettiness get the best of him because she notices that he's so engrossed with the music that he didn't realize that she came down the stairs. So, to piss him off, she deliberately takes off his mask and immediately regrets it because the sight of his face horrifies her, and he's obviously very upset that she did that. A bit later, the next day, she does apologize for what she did, and he accepts her apology and is more gentle with her and explains why he did what he did. That, he offered to take her hand in marriage to free her from her father's vices, because he felt like that if she stayed with her father, he would just continue to use her and use her and use her, and he didn't want her to be in that situation. He wanted her to live a good life. And he stresses to her that, after that, he's going to give her the choice to choose the date of the marriage up until New Year's Day. And then after that, he will make the choice. But he pretty much says that, he doesn't want her to love him per se. They don't have to be in love. He just wants someone for company. And that, they don't have to share a bed or anything like that. So they do get a little better with each other, although she is still a bit mad at him over, him practically buying her. That's the way that she sees it. A friend of the Phantom's, though, does say to her a bit later on, maybe you should tell him why you're upset, get it out in the open. So eventually she does do this, and she explains to Erik why she's upset, and, he realizes why she is. So he calls off the proposal, leaves the room, and then comes back into the room and does the proposal again, but this time leaves it up to her. And obviously she accepts. So after this, instead of being acquaintances that are a little tense with each other, they become friends at this point. So, he gets to know her more. She gets to know him more. She tells him that, she had a tutor where she was going to learn how to sing, but the tutor said that she had no talent. So he wanted to hear her sing to see if the tutor was right, and the tutor wasn't right. He said, your voice is very pretty. You just need to be taught. You have a ton of potential. So he offers to coach her, and she's obviously okay with that. And he finds out that she used to play piano. But every time she tries to play piano for him, she starts to have PTSD flashbacks of a particular memory, the memory of the night that things started to go to pot with her and her family. When, her youngest sibling had first gotten sick, and then eventually her other brother, and then her mother got sick and died as well. But she keeps on having that memory. But she insists on trying to play the piano once a week to try to get past that. But what happens is every time this memory starts up, it's a little bit different. Like, she becomes more self-aware, and she even explains this to Erik. And her father in the memory gets a little snarky with her and is like, oh, I control you. You can't do anything. Like, at some point in the memory, she tries to leave the room and she can't. And it just keeps on getting worse and worse as this memory happens when she tries to play the piano. But every week, she does still try to play the piano. Meanwhile, her and Erik are getting closer and closer, and they get to a point where she does ask him to take off his mask. Now, the thing that led up to this was that she was in her room, and she got scared because there was a huge spider in the room, and she screamed. So Erik comes in, worried that she got hurt. And then when he realizes it's just a spider, he's like, oh, that's not a big deal. And she's like horrified that he's able to pick this thing up like it's a kitten and is being very nice to it. And she wants him to kill it. And he obviously gets upset about this and he doesn't kill it. He brings it outside and is a bit cold with her afterwards. So she feels bad. And she does confront him about it later, trying to say it's just a spider. And he points out to her, it's like, you've only screamed 2 times that you've been here. The first was when you saw my face. And then she realizes why he's upset. And she's like, well, I only wanted you to kill the spider because it frightened me. And he's like, well, I frightened you. Did you want me dead? And she said no. So to prove to her that she doesn't see him as a scary monster, she asks that he take off the mask and that he doesn't wear it around her anymore. He fights with her about this at first and then gives in and takes off the mask. And, she doesn't have a bad reaction to it this time around. She even, goes up and is caressing his face. And he's, happy that she's doing this, but you can tell he's still rather bothered by it too. So it's obvious at this point that feelings are developing for both of them, although they haven't gotten that quite far yet. But they end up going to a masquerade ball, and they dress up. He dresses up as the Red Death, and she dresses up as the Raven, and they stand out in the crowd. But they spend the entire night dancing, to the point that all the other guests have already left, and they're still dancing until they couldn't anymore, and they end up going back home. And even though her progression with the piano has been getting worse and worse, where, the memories are very confrontational now, where she's fighting with her dad in her mind, and he's at first he's being very aggressive with her father in these dreams, or in this flashback, I should say. But then when she finally admits why she's angry at him, he stops being an ass, and he starts, explaining himself to her. Now, I forgot to mention this before, but it turned out that after Gustav, her father, was given the money by Erik, he decided to flee back to Sweden and never to be seen from again, and pretty much told Christine to not try to find him. And this really angered her, and I think this is what triggered the whole piano thing to begin with. So when she finally admits to her mind father why she's mad, he explains himself. He explains why he left. He said, I left so you wouldn't try to come back to me. I left so you could be your own person. Please forgive me. And she just keeps on refusing to forgive him. And he even says it's like, this isn't going to go away until you forgive me. And it's being described that the room that they're in keeps on forming cracks, and it gets worse and worse with each flash. So, after one of the piano sessions, Christine kisses Erik on the lips. And she finally admits that she does love him for him. That she does love him. She's fallen in love with him. And he's very happy because he's loved her for a very long time. So they decide to get married. The marriage is very simple. It's done at night, and the priest wasn't too keen on that at first. But let's just say Erik heavily bribed him with a lot of money. And they get married. So their wedding night, Christine wants to try to play the piano one more time to see if she can finally move past these PTSD flashbacks that keep happening in her head. Erik is concerned about it, but then he relents and he says he'll be here for her. Because every time she tries to do this with the piano, he sits next to her and he's there to be with her in case something goes wrong. So this time, it's different. She's not in the same room. It's not raining in the flashback. It's nice and sunny. And instead of her father, it's her mother. It's her mother's ghost. And her mother's ghost explains that Christine was the one that was forcing her father to be replaying in these flashback memories. And that, he left for her. And, Christine's mom pretty much acknowledges that he's not the same person that she fell in love with, and that she herself is very disappointed with how he handled things. But she told Christine, you must forgive him. Not for him. Don't forgive him for him. Forgive him for yourself so you can have some peace. So Christine does eventually do this. And, after her and Erik finally do the deed and consummate their marriage, which I will say, the author was very tasteful with that. It wasn't too graphic, so it was refreshing to read a sex scene that wasn't all descriptive. So after they do that, The final chapter is with Christine, and the final chapter is very, very short, by the way, but I feel like it works. She plays the piano, and there's no PTSD flashback. She's just playing the piano, and she's just letting the music embrace her, and that's how the story ends. It was a really good story. I will say the last couple of chapters had a couple of typos, and I do feel like the final chapter could have been a tad longer. But with that said, though, the story was really, really well done. It was well done for many reasons, not just because of the development of Christine and Erik's relationship. It was also good about describing what PTSD can do to one's mind, especially if you can't move past something. I mean, from my own experience, when Meg got possessed by that Ringmaster J5 and I was forced to kill her, that messed me up pretty bad. And it didn't help that I got my memories back of when Meg had, in her crazy fit of rage, had killed me that time. And for those who are not familiar with the old web show, you're probably like, what? What are you talking about? Yes, let me briefly explain. The thing is, we have the Dragon Balls, and Meg was very prone to committing suicide on the old web show, and trust me, she doesn't do that anymore. But she would have Dragon Balls. In fact, I still have them. We keep them in case we need one of these. Let's see. Got a Dragon Ball right here. See? Nice Dragon Ball. But anyway, she had a bit of a fit of rage with me one time because I decided to film an episode of her web show without her permission, and she took it the wrong way because I was being kind of sneaky about it. And she, had the straight blade and yes. And when I was brought back to life, I had a bad reaction. I hid in her closet for a week, and because I was hiding in her closet for a week, I went a tad insane. Meg felt really bad about what had happened, and she used the Dragon Balls again to erase my memory of the incident. I mean, I did find out about it, without remembering it, but I did find out about it and confronted her about it, but we moved past it, and I had forgiven her for it. Well, fast forward to the whole Ringmaster J5 thing. Meg was trying to say that if I remembered what she had done, I wouldn't be as forgiving and whatnot. So to prove a point to her, I got my memories back from Lesbian Jesus. And I was already having a bad effect from me being forced to kill her because of Ringmaster J5, that having the memories of me dying kind of messed with me in ways I didn't want to admit back then. And I probably should have, because a lot of things could have been avoided. Like me losing my temper with her twice and shooting her with a phase pistol twice. The second time, I almost killed her. So yes, that's what happens when you don't address your traumas. So this story, I felt, did a really good job of doing that. When it comes to the forgiveness thing, though, that I'm a little iffy about. I mean, in this instance in the story, Christine did need to forgive her father for her own mindset. But there's an old friend of Meg's who really, really, really messed with her psyche. To this day, Meg's a bit messed up over it. And this said person tried to contact us recently, leaving a comment on one of my old videos from before I started this series, and I promptly blocked them afterwards. This person I will probably never forgive, and Meg shouldn't forgive them either, because they won't take responsibility for what they did. And they don't feel sorry about what they did. And the icing on the cake is that they are pretending to be the victim when they are clearly not. So in that instance, no, forgiveness is not always the best course of action. Especially seeing this person had been forgiven for their past crap in the past. And look where it got us. I mean, in this instance in the story, yes, forgiveness was needed. But I don't think forgiveness is always needed with certain cases. But that's just from my own personal experience. This story was very well written. The chapters were not terribly long. So I feel like the chapters, there couldn't have been as much. I feel like some of these chapters should have been combined. So instead of it being 46 chapters, this author probably could have condensed it to 30 chapters, but then still have the same word count. And I do feel like the final chapter should have been a tad longer, but I digress. It was still a really well done story, and I would recommend that you check out this author and check out their other stories, because it was really, really good. Well, Thank you all for watching today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please be sure to like and leave a comment, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. I would greatly appreciate it. I'll see you all next week. Until then, cheerio.